that's one major reason why people don't start things, right? They just don't feel like they have the energy. So at the end of the day, they're, putting on YouTube or Netflix instead of putting in an extra hour to work on their side gig. So there are those habits. And of course, there's the habits of like talking to people and networking, and the business habits. There are all of these things that stack together, right? And that form success.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chinatown 2.0, a podcast about Chinese immigrants thriving. I'm your host, Richard Yan. Today, we're having an atypical episode featuring my career coach, Alec Sorensen. He is not of a Chinese diaspora background, but still a very interesting person to talk to nonetheless. Alec, we talked to him about how he got into the field of career coaching, what kinds of people he helps out, and what techniques he teaches to allow people to improve their productivity at work. Separately, Alec grew up Mormon, so we talked about his faith a little bit. And Alec also briefly moved to Japan, and we talked a little bit about his cultural shock while living in Japan as an American. Finally, Alec moved from the Bay Area in California to Austin, Texas, right before the pandemic happened. And this seems to be a very popular move these days. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Alec, welcome to Chinatown 2.0 podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no worries at all. I'm getting nervous all of a sudden because, we talk every week. You're my career coach and a good friend. But now I'm feeling like it's almost like I'm talking in front of a lot of different people now. I don't know if you're feeling nervous. I'm feeling a little bit more nervous than usual.
A little bit more, combination of nerves and excitement. It's kind of fun to... coaching is great. It's also very focused. So it's kind of fun to have the opportunity to have a more wide-ranging conversation with you.
Okay, awesome. Well, obviously, I know you well, but my audience members don't know you well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're all about? Maybe just very quickly, and we'll touch upon various aspects of your life later.
Sure. My main mission is to help people who have been putting off business ideas start to execute regularly and make progress on them, because it's really easy to have a great idea and just lock it away for months or years, never make progress. And so what I do is help people turn that into a business, whether that's like a new service within their business, whether that's a side hustle, or starting a brand new business and transitioning, say, from like professional services to entrepreneurship.
Okay. Wow, that's concise. And when you said you're serving people that kind of put off business ideas and don't actually act upon them, I'm like, that's definitely me. And hopefully not me anymore. Yeah. So it's been a transformative experience.
I think it's a temptation for all of us, right? Because we get very busy. And I benefit as well from actually talking to people and having them ask me, wait, what are your actual priorities? And like push back, like, is this what you really want to be working on right now? So I think it's helpful for everybody.
Okay. I wasn't aware it's that helpful for you. I guess no one ever actually goes up to a therapist and say, hey, do you benefit from these sessions? Or a coach and say, how does this actually help you? But maybe let's get into coaching a little bit. Talk a little bit more specifically about what coaching means, because to me it's very obvious because I receive it every week, but not everyone knows what it does. So
absolutely,
go ahead.
So I'll be really open that I think there is a lot of like trash coaching out there. And what you see on the internet, like one, there's tons of coaches. When I search for like life coach or career coach or other types of coaches, or I even search like looking for that, or phrases that I think might represent people who are searching for coaches. I don't get people searching for coaches. I get like tons of kind of, in my opinion, sort of spammy coaches. And they'll have really catchy headlines like, this person got $100,000 in 3 months using this plan, this marketing plan, or whatnot. And so I think a lot of what happens, like the bad coaching that I think people see, that I'm trying to differentiate from, is the idea that coaching is a way where you get these amazing results super quick because you just followed this, an easy to follow step. If there were an easy to follow, build a 6-figure business in 3-month plan, then there would be a whole lot more successful businesses, right? Yeah. And so and when you're looking at that business, it's not necessarily that they lied about that person getting it, but that person who got the 6 figures or whatever in 3 months, probably before they even came to the program, did years of work and started several businesses that they've learned from. And so like that program was maybe one lesson of 100 they needed to get that business, but then it's advertised as if like this coach or that online course was the one thing they needed for success.
Misattribution. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of one very narrow view of coaching. For me, coaching is really a lot more like what a physical sports coach might do, but for your like mind space and productivity. So just like a regular coach is not going to transform you to like an all-star athlete in a few months, you know, like what they're going to do.
Unlike with me, of course. Me being
you
the
were an
exception.
all-star athlete before you came. But you know, what a coach will do is when you show up regularly to work out, they will give you a consistently good workout. They'll help you identify areas like of bad form that are going to injure you or hold you back. And they're going to identify key exercises that will help you have the most progress going forward. And almost more importantly than anything else, they'll keep you progressing week to week. They'll keep you hanging on to the process week to week. And so that's the same thing I'm trying to do with business, right? So it's one thing to work, you know, 160 hours a week for a project for a short span of time, but it's another thing to put in regular time over weeks, months, years to learn the business skills that you need. And that's a matter of the right habits, the right mental habits in terms of productivity, the right physical habits in terms of like health and having the energy to work, as well as the right business habits.
Yeah, I think the key word there is habit. I think for people that have business ideas, they might have this misconception that these business ideas come and it becomes a passion of theirs and they just all of a sudden become workaholics and then get the idea going, right? But it almost feels like you're suggesting that there's another approach where you try to basically schedule time, put in the effort, and be a regular, say, effort taker of some sort, right? Through this habitual approach. And then you can get your business off the ground. Can you talk a little bit more about this habit-based approach? Because that is the one thing that I actually noticed about you when I was looking for coaches. The habit-based thing really jumped out because no one else was actually talking about that, I felt.
I think it's a shame. I think my major philosophy, actually, and I've put this out in a couple blog articles, is really there are no big things. So we think we can put forth a big effort, but all big efforts are really made of small efforts. And when you look at it, the amount of effort you can squeeze into a couple of months is nowhere near like working full-time, crazy, you know, odd hours, not sleeping, is nowhere near either the volume or the quality of effort you can put in dedicating regular time to something. And the other side of that too, that I think is often overlooked, is that the additive effect of multiple good habits over time, right? Like I said, a business is basically the product of 100 lessons you might learn. It's also the product of several good habits. So I mentioned a few, like there are productivity habits in terms of not multitasking, for example, and things that will help you focus. There are physical habits in terms of like exercising, eating right, so that you have enough energy to devote to, you know, a new product or service, right? That's one major reason why people don't start things, right? They just don't feel like they have the energy. So at the end of the day, they're, you know, putting on YouTube or Netflix instead of putting in an extra hour to work on their side gig. So there are those habits. And of course, there's the habits of like talking to people and networking, and the business habits. There are all of these things that stack together, right? And that form success. And often people pick out like one or two of those things. This is the reason I'm success, but it's usually the whole package, right? No matter how good you are at networking, if you're like too burnt out and you're low energy and not engaging in that networking, right? If you don't have the habits of the physical habits to like bring your presence and energy to other people, then that networking isn't going to be high quality. But like the reverse is true. You could be super healthy, but if you don't talk to people, right, you won't get that benefit of the social networking aspect. So there's all of these things that kind of work together. I do take a holistic view of basically transformation, and that the transformation of someone is usually not like one thing, one major change. It's a number of changes in the right direction, and you kind of monitor that week to week based on what has the most impact on your business or what's most interrupting it.
Yeah. I think for me, what's been helpful is you got me back onto regular exercises, which produced the energy that you spoke of. You got me to get in the habit of scheduling regular time for certain things that I need to work on in order to get my business ideas off the ground. But I think also very importantly, you were very gung-ho on getting down to the specifics. Because at the end of our session, I would say, okay, I'm going to work on X, but then you would ask, what does that entail? What looks like a good week for you? What kind of milestones do you have to reach by the end of the week for you to feel good about that particular goal of yours? And generally, if we don't do that exercise, I got into the habit of breaking that down now, right? But previously, I don't think I was doing that. It was a lot of me just sort of comforting myself that I'm going to be a good, entrepreneur that I always wanted to be, and I'm going to do this thing, but I don't know what it entails, and I don't care to break it down. And at the end of the week, I don't even know whether I've accomplished that goal, or maybe I did, but since my original goal was not clear, I ultimately didn't end up actually. I didn't have anything to measure against, and sometimes I can actually feel frustrated. So one of multiple failure modes: either you don't get anything done, or you don't get significant things done, or you got something done but you're still frustrated because you have a moving goalpost. So I think basically breaking things down into very specific chunks and visualizing how you're going to do them also helps in the habit approach.
Very much. I mean, that is a bread and butter of coaching that is so central. I sometimes overlook it when I'm talking about what is coaching. But that's probably actually the most important thing, what you pointed out there, which is no matter what epiphanies or ideas you have in the session, what really makes it transformative is that you have a very key action point that you're going to take through the week. And that next week, there's going to be someone checking in with you, making sure that you've actually accomplished that. And it's that week-to-week action that is exactly how I start people in building habits, right? Yeah. So we might do that for a few weeks until those actions kind of become automatic, or they've fixed the problem and you can kind of drop them. But either way, and then you kind of move on to the next habit or next key issue.
Okay, cool. Well, obviously, coaching is your main identity now, but you've worn many hats in the past, and we're going to meander a little bit and just explore the whole Alec Sorensen here. And so I've known you as a coach. Obviously, I've known you as a former software engineer. Maybe you still do some coding now, and you used to be you go to the Church of Latter-day Saints. Christ Latter-day Saints. Christ of Latter-day Saints.
It's a long name. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a mouthful.
Yes,
that's why people often call us Mormon. It's not the official name of the church, but it is.
I was looking for the politically correct term. You got.
That is the preferred name.
Which one? Mormons?
No, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Okay.
It gives a little bit better idea of what we're about. We also do have this thing called the Book of Mormon, which is where we get the nickname Mormon from. But we do like to focus on Jesus Christ. Whether or not for instance, Protestant churches accept us as Christian or not is kind of on them.
Yeah, and then we'll get into that. And then aside from that, you moved to Japan before, and you also tried to start up businesses while in Japan, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah.
And you moved from the Bay Area to Austin, which is a pretty popular thing to do these days, apparently. So I'd love to explore all of that. I mean, maybe starting with how you grew up. And a big part of growing up for you is being a follower of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So maybe talk a little bit about what that's like for someone that doesn't really know much about the religion, other than watching Book of Mormon, the Broadway show.
I actually haven't seen that. I mean, I've heard about it. But yeah, you asked me in an email, actually, one of the things is, what did I think of that? And I can't say having seen it, but was it from the creators of South Park or something like that?
Yeah, I would not be surprised if it was
or something like that. Yeah. I thought there was some connection. Anyway,
I'll tell you my reaction after hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, very irreverent humor. But one of my favorite anecdotes regarding that is that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, put out an ad in the Book of Mormon musical program. That's hey, if you want to find out more. I love the fact that the church didn't boycott it or say look, if you would put this. I mean, some individuals at church, like I heard kind of grumbling about it, being like, well, if you'd done this about any other faith, it would look really tacky, or people would really be disgruntled about that. But I love the fact that at least the church's official stance is like, okay, sure, do whatever you want, and we'll just put out an ad.
Yeah. You know how I think that happened to Borat with Kazakhstan.
Right.
Have you seen Borat? You must have
No,
seen
I
Borat.
haven't.
Oh, you have not seen? Okay, so
No, sorry.
the order of media: Borat, and then the Book of Mormons.
Mhm.
No, but with Borat, so he's like this British guy, Sacha Baron Cohen, pretended to be from Kazakhstan and made fun of Kazakhstan the entire movie. The country Kazakhstan originally was mad about it, but then they decided to like take advantage of it and then invited people to come, tour Kazakhstan, and took the high road, I suppose. Yeah, took advantage of the situation. But anyway, yeah.
Right.
So talk about it. So what are some rituals you had to go through? What are things you thought made a lot of sense? What are some things you might have to struggle with? And you have children now, right? Like, I'm assuming you and your wife are raising them as Mormons.
Yep.
So, how does that all work?
So I grew up in Northern California. I was practicing religious. I found that like very few of my classmates, especially by high school, were actively practicing religion. Like a few of them would kind of just like go for, go to their church. A couple of them were agnostic, but most of them were atheists. So it was definitely like being actively involved in any religion felt a little bit like a minority. Which was also fine. Like that's a background. And so I grew up both with, parents who are very strong in the faith. They definitely encouraged and were involved with, teaching us the faith. But I don't have the kind of sense that people often get of like fundamentalist Christian or, extreme Mormon or Jehovah's Witness or like, or Orthodox Jews or whatever, of like very strict parents. Like, I didn't really feel it as something imposed. Part of that kind of background growing up is my dad is very anti-institutional by nature. And I had a few friends who were very surprised when I said, I'm kind of the same way. I don't naturally identify with large groups of people, whether it's a church or a political entity or sports teams or anything. I just function on a more individual level, and on a very individual level, like that religion works for me. And as you say, like things that I struggle with, to be perfectly honest, I find large bodies, large groups of people overwhelming. There's like a lot of stimulus to think through. I tend to like.
When you say large groups of people, you mean physically when you're at the party, or do you mean just the fact that
party, going to church, like large groups of people, lots going on? Like for me, I
think there's a word for that.
I'm an overactive thinker, and that's something I kind of manage regularly and try not to be too neurotic. It works really well for me in small one-on-one situations where I can take in a lot of information about a person. And it works really badly for me if I'm not very careful about managing that when I go into a large group of people, because I don't know where to focus and I find it overwhelming. And so like that has been something where like I have had, spiritual experiences and inspiration going to church, but it's also for me been one of those things where it always takes a certain amount of effort to like submerge myself in a large group of people and shut out all of the kind of extra noise.
It's hard to keep track of your thoughts when there's too much distraction going on.
I mean, some of that, like it's easy to think about. It's easy. So the church is run by volunteers, except for at like very high levels. There are people who will work on it full time, but like your local congregation is entirely volunteers. So like it's really easy to get wrapped up in like the to-do list. Like, what am I doing to help out this week? Yeah. And worry about that too much rather than like getting into like the spirit of it. I think there's just kind of like being around other people and like who should I talk to and making small talk with people you don't know very well. All of those things, like whether that would be at church or a party, would consume way too much of my brain space. And so I've gotten better, for example, at bringing a notebook with me while I'm in a meeting to either like take notes or kind of brainstorm about, my emotional, spiritual state, things like that kind of help me get back to the meat of the experience, the spiritual experience. And that's been great, but that is something that definitely took a lot of practice for me.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. So I have to ask, right? So in your faith, I think there are two things that, let's say the canonical, you know, Christianity branches might take issues with, right? So number one is the faith says Jesus Christ actually came to North America, I believe, right? It was in Salt Lake City, I believe. Yeah, this
Not
was
necessarily Salt Lake City, but
okay, it was in New York, I think. Yeah,
we don't know. It would be the short answer. But it's in the Book of Mormon. So he visited people there anciently. We do believe Joseph Smith also had visions of him.
That was the second controversy, which is Joseph Smith, the founder. And he dug up some articles or some documents of faith, like in his backyard or something, and then claimed that this was the vision passed from Christ to him. And then, you know, he had all these different followers. And I don't remember his story. Was he like a morally upstanding person or no? I don't know.
There are a lot of questions about that. So yeah, to dive into the tenets of the faith, one, I am maybe unusual for a lot of Mormons in that, especially because I was brought up around atheists who thought all religion was ridiculous. Like, I'm pretty open, like, you know, the story of Joseph Smith is pretty far out there. I am of the opinion that a lot of the theories trying to explain him away under normal phenomenon are pretty far out there and don't really match with the data much either. But I'm pretty open that there's a lot of things that are hard to believe about it. And I've kind of like accepted that to a certain extent. But the high level story would be that a 14-year-old kid in upstate New York was, in his own words, basically very confused by everybody disagreeing about religion. There were several different denominations of Christianity who were like very friendly at first, but then when everybody had filed off to one church, they started like fighting very contentiously to like steal converts from other churches. And he was wondering what the right church was. So he goes into the woods after, you know, reading some passages of the Bible that inspired him to pray. And so he prays. He has a vision of God the Father who says, none of these churches are correct, and I will help you basically restore the true church. And then as a sequence of later visions, one of the restorations of the church is finding these golden plates and unearthing them that are a record of people who left Jerusalem, who had prophets and miracles. And at one point, Jesus visits them. It's not clear exactly where in the Americas they lived or even necessarily exactly how big that civilization was. But that's the Book of Mormon, for which we've often got our name. And that's kind of one of the central core things of the, you could call Mormonism, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is that we believe the Bible is scripture and we also have this other book of scripture.
So the little boy is Joseph Smith, right?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
Okay, so to summarize, basically, this boy was troubled by the civil war going on within the different denominations of the Christian faith. He prayed to God, and God said, "Yeah, those guys are wrong. There's actually yet another denomination, and here's how to find the
or essentially they'd all departed from the truth, and some of that not necessarily like these individuals right then, but that." The church as instituted by Jesus was probably changed pretty quickly after all of his apostles died.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're an open-minded person, you're going to enjoy the Book of Mormon. Don't go in expecting they hold no prisoners. Like they don't hold no punches back.
Yeah. And so you asked me, was he a morally upstanding person? So I'll address that because there are a lot of controversies with him. So he was, before founding the religion, a treasure seeker. So a lot of people kind of hold that against him. Like this whole golden plate story is this, just part of his, crazy treasure seeker phase. And actually what you see as he gets more religious, he kind of pulls away from that mentality and actually pulls, like there are people who want to pay him to try and find treasure. And he starts saying like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. So like, that's not a big thing for me.
But hold on. What's the controversy with being a treasure hunter?
Just people think like, oh, he's a fraud. He's someone who he was paid by some people to find treasure, but it's kind of clear like that was something that he pulled away from. A lot of people view his starting a religion as like an offshoot of that, but again, like they seem actually kind of in tension. If you look at the specifics of his site, a lot of people would argue he claimed to have translated the Book of Mormon. And there are witnesses who saw the actual plates, but he did not release them generally. So there are a lot of people who say he wrote that, made that up. That's a controversy around him.
Right. The controversy is that no one has actually seen those plates, right?
There were a very small set of witnesses who were people very close to him who wrote testimonies to the fact that they had seen the plates, but it was not like generally or publicly available. And so
I gotta say, this is sounding more and more like crypto. I'm not even being facetious. Oh man, there's so much overlap. But yeah, keep going. So yes, so you said you were talking about like the first part of his life.
Yeah, so that's the first part. So he moves west partially because of a lot of persecution
from the other churches.
Churches, people generally, they settle in a few places, they get kicked out of a lot of places with their land essentially stolen. And there's a number of reasons for this. Religion is one of them, politics is another, because they were predominantly anti-slavery people, often living in the South or areas of the frontier that were more pro-slavery. There's just the idea of a bunch of Mormons moving into the neighborhood regardless of their politics, and being able to like block vote things in. I think that scared a lot of people. But the other aspect, the big aspect that a lot of people come to too, is he did start a practice of plural marriage or polygamy. That was later officially renounced by the church, so it is not practiced or encouraged in any way, shape, or form now. But he started that, and a lot of people have issues with that. And I will be honest, that I've done a lot of research, enough to find that a lot of people who have very strong opinions about that are usually excluding some form or fact. It's really kind of hard to tell for me what's going on there. And that kind of is more of the thing of like, all right, I'll take it as a matter of faith that he was a prophet. I don't understand that particular incident. But one of the things that does kind of bolster my faith is that, I mean, he really was willing to die for the faith and eventually did. So he was killed by a mob, and knew as he was arrested, taken into jail, and then like the jailers basically just let the mob in and kill him. And he kind of knew, based on a lot of things that were happening, that would happen. So at the very least, he was sincere. Now, like whether he was like crazy or a prophet, that's kind of, that's where the faith comes in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is where it starts diverging from crypto. but wait, hold on. So I was going to ask you, but polygamy, is that something still commonly practiced in the Mormon community these days?
So the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like categorically no. Like you cannot be a practicing polygamist and member of this this church, right? So there was a later prophet who reversed that practice, and there are all sorts of theories. There's all sorts of theories ranging from, I mean, of course, like there are people predominantly outside the church who would say Joseph Smith is just a predator and a fraud. Again, I don't think the data actually bears that up. There are people in the church who think he was a prophet, but the whole polygamy thing was a fallen prophet. And I guess in that sense, you could think like maybe his martyrdom was kind of planned by God because, God was saying you're off the rails. That's not a very common Mormon viewing of it, but I have heard people articulate that. There's a lot of people kind of in the same camp as me, is like, I don't understand what that was, and I'm glad we're not doing it now, but I'm still going to have faith because there's enough other good things and enough other signs that I've seen that this is worthwhile to me. And then there's a lot of people who will articulate theories like a lot of men in the early church were killed, and the practice of polygamy helped provide for some of the widows, and helped
because they had other wives. They had hold on, but the polygamy is one man, multiple women, right? So if the men were killed, the men were killed, so there were more women than men. It's also really clear that there are instances where this is not at all the motivation, but there's some people who say like that might be part of the motivation of polygamy, or so like there are people who really look to justify it, and I'm not necessarily. I don't get it. Hold on. So if it's one man, I still don't get it. So if you have one man and 5 wives or 3 wives, right? Like in Big Love, the guy was wearing 3 rings in the poster. But anyway, like, so one man, multiple women, and if a man is killed, why is the system better than if it's a monogamy system?
So, I mean, there were a number of things that happened. There were in one state, for example, when the Mormons were kicked out, it was actually legal to kill Mormons. Like it was signed into law by the governor. And so, and I think it was literally called the Extermination Order. And so there weren't a lot of large scale wars, but there were smaller fights killing off, what were the men in still a relatively small community, right? And so you have fewer men, more women. Polygamy was never practiced by every man.
I see what you're saying now.
Right?
Yeah.
But,
Right.
some men did take extra wives. Now, again, I would say like there's a lot of clear instances, especially with Joseph Smith, where it looks like there really is no pattern. There's all sorts of crazy stuff he did, including marrying officially older women who, there's no record of him really having any relation to. And so like there's all sorts of craziness that you can't pin on that. But there's kind of when I was delineating camps of different thought around polygamy, there are some people who seek to justify it.
Yeah.
Now, again, within the church, there's no one who says we should be doing that now.
Yeah. Okay.
I actually have an anecdote about that. My dad worked for a university president who was also a lawyer, who right now is in the leadership, what we call the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Who he wasn't at the time an apostle.
Leadership of the Mormon Church.
Yeah, he's currently in the leadership, but at the time he wasn't. He was a university president and again, practicing lawyer. And so he actually in the 60s like took the case, or 70s, I guess. It was like saying, with a lot of the redefinition of what relationships are like, we might be able to like legally get some sort of exception to have polygamy. And he presented that to who were the prophet and 12 apostles then in the church. And he just met with complete stony silence. Nobody wanted that back. So, so within the church, we have a strong feeling against that. Now, what you will see is people who are not part of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but basically were an offshoot at some point before the church renounced polygamy, who do practice it, who probably do believe in some form or fashion in like the Book of Mormon, who would be kind of a splinter sect, I guess. And there are some of those that do still practice polygamy.
Okay. By the way, you mentioned the prophet and the 12 apostles. Is there a current version of the prophet and 12 apostles alive today? So, and then how do they get the new ones?
So new apostles are just called by inspiration, and generally speaking, the prophet is decided on by the 12, but the standard mechanism actually is seniority. So the most senior apostle generally becomes the prophet.
But what do you mean by called by inspiration? Like, what if someone just says, "I'm inspired. I want to be the 13th apostle"?
So the apostles call a new apostle, right? You can't really like volunteer for that. In like a traditional Protestant church, for instance, you might have pastors that kind of say like, I feel called, I'm going to become a pastor. That does not happen anywhere within the hierarchical organization of the church. We believe you absolutely can have your personal relationship with God and receive personal revelation from God, but like as far as like the structure of the church, you are always called. So I said it's volunteer. So there's always like, for instance, a local bishop who's calling people to positions within a local congregation, or, there are bigger groups for larger areas. And eventually, there are apostles calling other people to the apostle, but you never volunteer yourself. You can accept or reject when you have a calling that is offered to you, basically.
Yeah, I've got to say, I think the overlap between religion and crypto is that people on the outside generally have a hard time accepting it. And there's usually some form of denouncement of the spiritual leader being some kind of fraud. And and a spiritual leader, if you're in the religion, however, you see that person as a saint, as a bearer of truth, and you generally think see that person as genuinely believing in what that person claims to believe. And I think part of this whole crypto movement is just people choosing to essentially adopt certain faiths. And I mean, at some of these crypto conferences, there are these prayer breakfast. Well, not for like crypto faith people, but for like Christians. So Christians would organize, and then they would associate fiat, US dollars and Japanese yen and the British pound as evil, and like Bitcoin as Bitcoin as redemption.
Interesting.
I should send you a book. There's a book called Bitcoin is God's money or something like that.
Fascinating. Yeah. Well, and I think you highlight something there. I think there are one of the things, obviously, religion cultivates is faith, but I personally believe that's something we use in a lot of aspects of our lives. And essentially, for me, what faith is a commitment to an as yet unrealized good, or an as yet unrealized ideal. Like it might not even be fully realizable, but you're committed to bringing that into the world as much as possible. And that isn't inherently tied to God. For many people, God is that ideal, right? But crypto could be that, right? The crypto revolution. There's all sorts of other social movements that have certain ideals that really aren't proven or primarily based on like studied research and evidence. But are just like a tenet of this is my ideal. I want to see it more in the world. And so I think that happens in all sorts of movements.
Yeah, I really like what you said, commitment to an unrealized ideal. It almost seems, that reminds me of a saying, the ends justifies the means a little bit. So as you're talking to me about Joseph Smith, I'm actually reminded of someone named Charles Hoskinson. So he is the leader of the number 3 crypto right now by market cap. It's called Cardano. And so he does, I'm going to offend a lot of people by saying this, the Cardano army. No, seriously. So you're laughing now, but this guy, he does a YouTube stream like once a week or so. He's extremely eloquent, comes off as a very, very bright person. Lex Friedman, the podcaster, has only interviewed a handful of crypto people, maybe only 2 or 3, like Vitalik Buterin being one of them. And then one other person is this Charles Hoskinson guy. Now, the issue people have with him is that he has essentially like lied about things. There's so many controversies. One of them being he claimed to have done a PhD. Well, he never finished it. So he tweeted out, he's saying, people are like, hey, do you have a PhD? He's like, no, never finished it. Turned out he never even finished an undergrad. But then he went on interviews claiming that he did a PhD and never finished it. But he was always very careful with the way he worded things. So I was like, never finished it. I'm going to return and complete it. Well, I never said I started it. I just never finished it, right? Anyway, so now there's a new book coming out, like with allegations of things of this nature for him, and other crazy stories about him just complaining to others about various aspects of his life at work that people didn't understand why he was being so forthcoming with his personal life and so on. And also just saying grandiose things such as the experience he's had and these visions he had and so on. And what you said about Joseph Smith very, very much reminded me of him. I almost feel like there should be a movie or something like chronicling crypto in this, like documenting crypto in the context of religion and drawing parallels. I mean, being in the industry, I actually feel that the thing is that like, it's controversial. Like religions have been used as an excuse to start wars, to persecute the innocents, but it's also been used to do a lot of good. And it's been used to unite people, to help the homeless, and to care for new immigrants, right? And so when you said it is a commitment to fulfilling an unrealized vision, I think Cardano is going to start using that for their as their tagline.
Nice. Well, and like you said, right? Like that formulation is very open, right? It does not actually specify that is necessarily a good or divine vision, right? When you specifically attach it to the divine, then it becomes religious. There's a really good book that really solidified some interesting things for me. It's called Fields of Blood, Religion and the History of Violence. But essentially the thesis of this is one, they show how there are inquisitions that are completely atheistic, right? That you don't need religion to have inquisitions or war, that people do it anyways. When you look at least big religions, like the religions that have exploded, this is not necessarily like every cult that forms, but like big religions, very typically, they are reactions against systemic oppression and violence. That includes Christianity, that includes Buddhism, that includes, all sorts of things. There are Hindu figures from that. And even, as much as we associate today, or many people associate today, like Islam with violence, if you do look at the Prophet Muhammad, he was much quicker to negotiate and slower to violence than most of the political leaders of his day. You may disagree with some of his principles, but he was a principled person, more so than most. He's a weird figure because he was also a political leader and a religious leader, which, like, for instance, Christ and Buddha were very much not. There's a strong strain of renouncing. But anyway, she just takes a look at that and she says that doesn't mean there are never any atrocities motivated by religion. But with the examples you can see, you can kind of see like there is an arc, and this might apply outside of religion too, where you have someone who's very charismatic, who's bucking certain aspects of violence or oppression in a current system. They start this thing, and then that very thing becomes appropriated by the political environment, and then basically becomes the reason, like in the Crusades, you know, when the Catholic Church was essentially also a political power, they start declaring wars and other things, which really isn't in line with much of what Jesus was saying, but like, you kind of have that appropriation of that ideology as politics see like, oh, this is powerful, right? Like people are committed to this. I want them to be committed to me. I'm going to appropriate their ideal, or at least like put on some window dressing and pretend, and then try and see if I can get them committed to my causes.
Right.
So
misappropriation.
Right.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of these bad things were bound to happen, and people needed some excuse. If it's not this religion, some other cause. So maybe tell me a little bit about your experience as a missionary, because you traveled to different countries. Were you like, you know, were you in the white shirt with a black tie, knocking on doors with Bible in hand, and usually two people at a time?
Always, So that's part of the rules. So these are like, you know, I think back in the day it was like 19 to 21.
Is it mostly donations?
So if you can't pay for a mission, you can get help with donations, but generally speaking, they're self-funded. There is a set amount given for every missionary like in the world to pay for their own mission. So that means if you get sent to a really cheap place or get sent to a really expensive place, you're still paying the same amount. It's kind of averaged out. So I had saved up a bunch basically for like both college and mission. And then
how old were you?
I was almost 20 when I started. So it's like typically at the time it was 19 to 21. I think they've changed that to make it a little bit earlier, like 18-year-olds can go.
And this is only for boys, right? Like girls don't get to go.
So as much as anything, and this is kind of where it's hard to say, like I would say it's mandatory for guys, but it's not actually true. You can say no. There's a lot of encouragement and pressure for every male to go. There's like no specific consequence for not going or anything. You're not like
just social pressure.
Well, yeah, there's social pressure. It's like, that's why I want to say like, you're not ostracized. It's like the church would not encourage you to ostracize people who haven't gone on missions. And that doesn't preclude you from being able to serve in any capacity in the church later on or anything. But, you know, human beings being what they are, like, I'm sure there are some, you know, some groups within wherein those people get ostracized or whatnot, which is always unfortunate. So there is pressure.
I mean, why wouldn't people go? I mean, it's a nice trip, right? And you generally, well, I guess unless you are assigned to, you know, like a neighboring state or something, then, you know, forget it.
My oldest brother, who was like, you know, hoping to go international, got sent to Utah. So, and not just Utah, but he was going to school in Utah. So like he'd been there in that specific area before. And so
I mean, that's so inefficient. I mean, Utah probably has the biggest population of Mormons in the country.
They actually have a lot of converts too, right? So like Salt Lake City, for example, is 50% Mormon. You know, in certain towns, it might be a higher percentage, but that means actually there's a lot of non-Mormons.
Like a non-Mormon person being converted to a Mormon? So when you have a convert? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of non-Mormons who have exposure to Mormons, which is a reason either to be completely disgusted with your experience or to convert, you know, whichever, you know, based on your experiences and your answers to prayer or not.
Okay. So anyway, you went to Romania, didn't you?
I went to Romania.
Okay. Yeah, that's much better than Utah.
I couldn't have pointed it out on a map before, but it was exciting. So when you put in your paperwork to apply to be a missionary, I guess it's like the one exception, right? Where I say you don't like volunteer, you do volunteer to be a missionary, but the place you actually get called to is chosen for you. And like on the forms, all you can say is how confident I am that I can learn another language and how much I wanted to learn another language. So I really wanted to go international. So like I just put those at 10 or whatever the maximum was, and they sent me to Romania.
Okay, so did you have to learn Romanian?
Yep, I learned Romanian. It's the forgotten Romance language, so it's a little bit weirder than Spanish, but a lot easier than, say, Japanese.
Do you still speak Romanian today?
I can understand some. I think there's a moment in, what is it, Avengers Civil War, where Bucky, who actually, the actor is Romanian, is in Romania and speaks Romanian And I had like, when I was sitting in the theater, I had this weird disjunction where I knew what he was saying, but I realized it wasn't English. I was like, wait, what? And then it took me a second to realize he was speaking Romanian, because I don't often stumble upon it. I'm rusty, but it's still there.
Okay. Right. And then you would knock on doors and ask people, have they seen Jesus Christ? Or what is the relationship with
Jesus Christ?
Are you serious?
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of people you meet talking to people on the street. So some of those are street people with their typical mental health issues, which is possibly why they're on the street. You talk to all sorts of people. So very kind, awesome people, very rude people, and all sorts of very busy people, and some people who are actually interested. So, you know,
have you bumped into a Mormon? Like he's like, yeah, it's like high-fiving you.
They're rare enough, especially in Romania, that wasn't really common. And so like if there was a local Mormon, we knew them because we'd been to church with them that Sunday. So like, or if they were practicing, occasionally I'd run into somebody who wasn't practicing, or you know, had been practicing in another country and moved to Romania. You know, where
are there KPIs of converts? You know, you keep track of like how many you talk to and how many you got, you know, involved.
Yeah, so absolutely, you would keep track of discussions, was what we called when you talk to someone and they actually say, yeah, I've got a moment, and you sit down and start talking to them about God and what we believe, Book of Mormon, etc. So we did track those. We tracked baptisms. Most missionaries that I know, especially since they're like 19 to 21-year-olds, like I guess some people like having goals and they really get into it, but most missionaries I know, like they do that because like you have to keep order, right? And there's paperwork so that we know who's baptized and who's not, and we can, you know, take care of the people who do convert and whatnot. But for the most part, that wasn't really a focus of what I was doing. I mean, to be very honest, again, like I said, you know, where like large public spaces are overwhelming to me, like a lot of what I was doing was just like, all right, don't freak out, like, you know, don't overthink it, just find someone and talk to them. And then, as typical for me, like the knocking on doors, stopping people on the street, that was heart stopping for me, just because of like anxiety and overwhelm and other things. But having small conversations with people who are like trying to change their lives, or who have experienced a tragedy, or who are just curious, like that was really fulfilling, to be able to offer them things that have been helpful in my life. And offer those things to people. You know, some people take it and it changes their life too, some people don't, and that's just fine. But it was I always feel, and this is true of like a coach, being a crisis counselor for a little while, or being a missionary, like I feel very honored, I think is the best word, you know, to be a part of people's inner struggles, and that they have like the trust to share those things with me. So that has been something that as a missionary, you know, for all the awkwardness of stopping people on the street, that is one of the things that kept me going.
Okay. Are there missions in China at all?
There are Mormons in China. I don't think I think there may be missionaries that can go and support the churches that exist, but there are pretty strong rules about not proselytizing there. And as much as possible, like we do try and follow the rules of a country, and follow a long-term goal of like building trust and hopefully earning the right to teach.
Yeah, and I assume there's no mission to places like North Korea, for example.
There probably are no missionaries there, but there aren't very many places where I would say that, but that would be one of them. There are Middle Eastern places where it'd be very problematic to teach. And, you know, sometimes what happens actually in a lot of these cases, we'll send service missionaries. So like people who go to, you know, help out, teach English, help with natural disasters or other humanitarian efforts, right? And kind of do what we can, but not teach. Yeah.
I have to say the community aspect actually does resemble crypto quite a bit too. So like if I were to travel to another city for a conference or go to a crypto meetup, local meetup, I just feel this energy, this vibe, where I know that they have been converted, they have been red-pilled, whatever the term is. And, you know, and then it's a little bit of us against the world sort of thing. And if the market's down, we all kind of share the pain. If the market's up, we're all happy, right?
And you're committed to some of the same ideals. I think the other piece, I mean, there's like the hierarchical piece of calling, which is probably a little bit different, but like the fact that a local Mormon congregation or Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint congregation is run entirely by volunteers, like that's probably like a lot of crypto projects. And, for good, it has a lot of the good and challenges probably that those organizations face.
Yeah. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. You did your mission in Romania, right? But that's not your only international engagement. You went out to Japan quite a few years later after you got married, right? And so tell us a little bit about that. Like, why did you decide to go? Where were you traveling from? Did you move from Northern California? And how was your experience in Japan?
Yeah, so actually the two are kind of related. So at the end of my mission, when I was applying to go back to college, I realized that I could learn a language. I just hadn't been that into it in high school. And so I knew there was no Romanian minor, and I wasn't committing to do a minor, but I thought like, oh, I'd like to pick a language I could actually minor in. And Japanese was one of those languages. I grew up with anime and sushi, so I'm like, hey, why not why not Japanese? And I actually met my wife at a study abroad for Japan. So we had both been in the country. I eventually went on to kind of do different things and not really focus on Japanese or keep up my Japanese very well. Meg has repeatedly gone back to Japan to teach English and speaks Japanese really well. And it was a bucket list item for both of us to go live abroad, and like Japan was the natural spot for us. At the time, we were in Northern California. However, the tricky part was that for her, like, she knew she would be fine living in Japan for like the near to long term. I was like, oh, this might be a fun thing to try out.
Yeah.
And we didn't really agree on like when we were done trying it out and what the result of that would be. So we kind of went on this adventure with sort of like different goals, and it was kind of a wild ride. It ended up being, so it's a move from Northern California around like Mountain View-ish area to basically the boonies in Japan, like way high up in the mountains. Have you ever seen The Shining?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay, well, it's a remote hotel way in the mountains. It's almost like what we were in Japan. So like there was a ski city. We were 30 minutes up the mountains into like living in a condo 30 minutes away from the ski city that was, fairly isolated. The little village where we're living had like maybe a year-round population of 100.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, I mean, not quite as remote as that one famous hotel, but like that's, you could envision that, like giant snowdrifts, 16 to 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
Like it was
perfect
exciting.
perfect scene for a backdrop for murder mysteries.
Yeah. Well, we didn't murder anyone, but we did play some adventure games that involved murder mysteries. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, 100 people, were there Americans outside of you guys?
So we were there largely because Meg had the opportunity to train teachers at a school there. Right. What happened actually is the former principal quit right before we came. And so Meg was both principal and like teacher and teacher trainer. But there were other teachers, and there was the former principal in the town. So we hung out, we played basically a Dungeons and Dragons style game occasionally, which was fun. We went and ate Japanese food that the students would prepare.
Was there good internet?
So there was good internet. Okay.
Thankfully. Yeah, right. What year was this? This was after 2000, right?
Yeah, so see, I finished my master's in 13, and then I did a couple years of work. So it was like 2016 to 18, something like that.
Yeah, so I think what's very interesting here is the trajectory of your career development. I know this might sound very unnatural to an American person, but the freedom to minor in a language that you're just interested in with no kind of no prospect economic payoff, or at least no expectation of getting a job with, right? And your decision of just going on an adventure and living in a foreign country, also not for material purposes. That's actually quite foreign to a lot of Chinese people. Yeah, I think it's foreign to me as an immigrant, and it's also foreign to Chinese people in China. Like, I guess at least for people that live in the urban places. Because I think there's this set path you kind of want to get into as the college. There's strict ranking every year. Just go for the as high up as possible. There's a definitive way of getting there. You just need to get high grades. I mean, high scores on
Right.
the entrance exam, and afterwards you get into the best companies, and then you get married, and also there's also tons of material standards for evaluating a mate, right?
Yep.
And there needs to be approval from parents on both sides. I'm stereotyping a little bit, but it's absolutely true. Stereotypes are all true. and then after that, you try to do well in the company, and then once you have kids, you try to send them abroad to study. Maybe not anymore with the new politics, but back then that was the case. And this idea of letting your kids just roam free and learn a new language, I'm repeating myself, and doing these things that doesn't seem to have a very clear purpose, that certainly does not resonate with me, and definitely does not resonate with my dad. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
What message do you have for my dad?
Dad,
like if
what is that like?
Alex,
I mean, there's a couple things,
Yeah.
like some context, right?
Yes.
My understanding, so I mean, one, obviously China has a lot more people than the US, but my understanding is it's not as industrialized. Is that fair to say?
Right now, I mean,
Yeah, not as much of the country is industrialized. You have a lot more people living in less industrialized situations, I should say.
Oh yeah, I mean, the GDP
Right.
per capita is still a fraction of what it is in the US. The urban areas can be very developed, and there's wealthy elites that are enjoying a life of plenty, if not debauchery in some cases.
And actually, that's what I want to speak to. So basically, with a large population, but a smaller percentage of that able to be employed in kind of these highly developed areas, huge competition, right? So that really shapes the landscape a ton. And so my wife works a lot with Japanese people. She also works with some Chinese people. So one person she was working with helped to go to, I think someone wanted to do grad school in the US from China, who was an accounting manager, but being paid like 30,000 or less, like US dollars. And like, working, who knows how much, 70, 80 hours at least a week, right?
This person is based in China right now.
Yeah,
right?
based in China, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's so much competition that job, even though that would be, worth more and not quite as competitive in many cases as time. I'm sure actually my mom has been an accountant manager, and I'm pretty sure she works her long weeks, but maybe not quite as consistently.
Yeah, probably not 996.
Right, exactly, that
9
kind of thing, right? Not that. And so that competition, that level of competition where, as like the US, you kind of like you said, like per person, there are more of these types of opportunities. That meant that for me, I was capable of being a good software engineer. And to be honest, most software engineers, or your average software engineer, only study stuff in between jobs or when they have to for a particular task. Just by doing a little bit extra and, studying on my own regularly. And I've always been interested in learning and good at that. So just by doing that, I could always be kind of maybe not one of the very top tier software engineers, but always, somewhat on the better end, clearly good at what I do, confident I can get a job whenever I need it, etc. And then that did give me a lot of freedom to take these breaks. So for example, when we went to Japan, we had room and board covered, so we knew we wouldn't be spending money. We also knew we wouldn't be making much money, because beyond room and board, we just had a super small stipend. And so but we're free to do that because it was possible for me within the space of a few years in a Silicon Valley job to save up enough money that we'd have a safety net to come back to.
Right. Okay.
So that's the thinking along that line, at least.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head about competition. In China, too many people are replaceable. And I mean, I've communicated this to you in the past, but there is a thing called midlife crisis for engineers, and that midlife point is 35 years of age. So once you hit 35, if you're still coding in China, apparently I learned not too long ago, you're considered a loser. You have to move into management. And if you're still coding, there's no respect for individual contributor, right? Whereas here at Google, for example, you could have 2 tracks, give a manager, you could go IC. But the truth is, I think a lot of these big Chinese companies, they tend to solve problems with just piling more people. They don't try to, I'm stereotyping a little bit now too, but this is what I hear from people that have worked there in very high positions. They don't hire super senior architects to build things that are free of technical debt, that are
Mhm.
easy to audit, easy to use, extensible. And instead, every time there's a problem, they just try to get more junior guys to work on it. And therefore, they need people to work long hours that don't complain, right? And
Mhm.
those people tend to be those that are young, without family attachments and have the energy. But that's all different in the US, which is why what you're saying is if you are able to hone your skills to become a top end engineer, then you kind of have that safety net with big tech or a consulting job because your skills are being appreciated.
Mhm.
So yeah, so that kind of logic actually won't apply in China, which is why I think I feel that life is actually more intense and more competitive now than when I was a kid back there. Like I thought I had it. I didn't feel it was bad, but I definitely felt it was competitive from very, very early age on. So I think one challenge for me here now is, what now? I mean, there seems to be a safety net now here for me and my children, but do we lose that momentum and competitiveness and that fierce spirit? And do we channel that into a different thing? Or do we just say, life is different now. You don't have to be that way. And maybe that is unhealthy to begin with. So yeah.
Good
I mean,
questions.
yeah, your wife Meg talks to all these Chinese people, and to them, I think everything I'm saying actually sounds pretty foreign to them. There's not a whole lot of introspection that takes place because I feel a lot of people think it's unnecessary.
Mhm.
Like, so what if? I'm talking about people in China, right? Like, why think about these things that are outside your control, and when everyone else is busy working, and out competing you? So yeah, there's actually a term called laying flat now in China. So laying flat basically refers to someone essentially giving up and not wanting to participate in the rat race,
Yep.
not wanting to have to buy a large condo and buy a car to impress their in-laws, and finding another mate that's also laying flat, just
Mhm.
taking it easy. Yeah. Well,
I've heard of that. I mean, I think, one of the cultural differences, and part of it can be competition, part of it could be other factors, but I think the US has had enough experimentation to realize that a lot of innovation, i.e., like really successful products, inventions, etc., like aren't something you can purely brute force, right? There has to be some quality of thought that's going to come from experience, that's going to come from having time to think creatively, like stepping back, seeing the big picture. So in principle, I think we have seen that enough times that we trust it a little bit more maybe than some other cultures. I would say like we're not masters of it by any means because there's so many companies that even if they don't do 996 basically have the same philosophy, i.e., we're measuring a worker's performance by how much time they sit in a chair rather than like, their contribution, measured contributions to the team, et cetera. So it's not like we're perfect, but I think that's also a difference. And the idea that like, or at least my idea has been that the fact that I am a multifaceted person, for example, and have done interesting things enriches all of the things that I do. Like they have helped me grow as a person, and I take a lot of that back to different events, directly or indirectly. I don't always feel in my career as an engineer that was really valued to its full extent. And that was part of the reason why I became a coach, because I felt like there's a whole, like I could exercise a lot more aspects of my personality than I could as an engineer. But at the same, by the same token, like I said, like that idea, that concept is not entirely foreign.
Okay. So maybe talk a little bit more about Japan. When you were there, what kind of a cultural shock did you have? And what are some stereotypes that were actually absolutely true?
So I had been there before, and I had actually lived with a Japanese family for a while.
Oh, you did? Okay. This
Yeah.
was in college or?
Yeah, in college.
Okay.
And
As
then
an
I had
exchange
visited,
student.
briefly once before. So I kind of knew in general what I was signing up for. I think the big difference for me was the difference between being in, Yokohama by Tokyo or Kyoto, which is more rural, but still like the old capital and still very developed, versus like being in the very remote mountains where nobody speaks English. And so that was, that was a little bit of a culture shock, just the remoteness. And to a certain extent, if I moved to a town of 100 people in the US, I'd have some of those same issues.
Yeah.
some of the things that I noticed that were very true were, the Japanese people are polite. Like, yes, culturally, I find they are very helpful. If you have, like, you can stop probably a random Japanese person on the street, and not only will they give you directions, which, hopefully most American people might do, like often they will walk you to where you need to go. Wow. Or something like that. They'll go the extra mile. Actually, I can give a great example from our trip over. So we had a layover in LA in California, and I had a bunch of baggage at the end of the walkway as we were getting off the plane, and my wife was trying to manage that. We had a 10-month-old and a 2-year-old. My 2-year-old takes off booking up the walkway into the terminal, and I am like screaming blue murder, like, hey, could someone catch that kid? I literally see the gate attendant look at me and look at the kid and do like zero. I get my hands on him and turn back to like get the luggage, and she says, sir, you can't go back there.
Oh, wow.
And I try to be calm and collected, but you can probably hear like my voice as I'm talking about this, like some of that emotion comes back to where like I know my wife is there with a 10-month-old baby and everybody's luggage that she's not going to be able to handle, and I'm just furious at this flight attendant. And so I tend to be like a little enthusiastic, but like in confrontation, like chill back. But this is the first time like I intentionally got like very close up in someone's face and said, I am going back there, or like, you're going to get the luggage because you could have helped me catch my kid before I left. You chose not to. This is your problem now. And then that person agreed to help my wife get the luggage, under extreme duress. So the next flight, we take it to Tokyo. In the Tokyo airport, everything is running on time. There are no lines like backing up anything. And as we're like navigating all of this luggage and our kids, without even being asked, 2 very nice young women, in the airport uniforms come up, get us the little baggage carts and wheel them for us to where we need to go. And we just like breathed a sigh of relief, right? And so very, very different in terms of like their sense of obligation and like their politeness and their respectfuless. There is a certain amount of like in-groupness, like that's the stereotype of Japan. One stereotype of
in-groupness.
They don't really like. They're not always very inclusive. Like they're very kind and polite, but they're not necessarily very inclusive of people who are not Japanese. And like I would say that did not consistently bear up. I have like one occasion where I kind of wonder, where there was a preschool we were trying to get our 2-year-old and then like during this process 3-year-old into hoping that he'd kind of like integrate and learn some Japanese, and they said they were full, and it's like the only preschool in this area, and we're like, really, are you really full? Like you couldn't take one more kid? And it probably whether or not they had the resources to have one more kid, like I bet the thing there was Eli hadn't really taken to learning Japanese, and they weren't really equipped to teach people who are not Japanese. And so like we managed to do some like go to activities sometimes where I would take the kids and like be helping them follow the exercises. But like that was one where it's like, okay, I felt a little bit outsider, but like that was also on us because we didn't all speak the language. So, generally speaking, I found people very engaging, very helpful. We went to some fun festivals, and the people there would be happy to talk to me and happy to tell me when my kids were about to shove their hands into the fire, and very approachable.
Okay. I'm actually surprised at how few people are immigrating to Japan. I mean, I hear income inequality isn't that big of a problem. It's generally a safe place. And, it feels like people yes, there's the in-group phenomenon, it sounds like, but they're also very welcoming, very helpful to foreigners.
So I mean, there's a couple things. Japanese is a hard language, compounded by the fact that it is a character-based written language, which makes it even harder to learn. Right. So that's a heavy lift. And the Japanese program for learning English is generally not very good. And that's like one of the things my wife does a lot is help people learn in a way where they're confident actually having conversation in English versus just like memorizing a list of vocab words, which is a lot of what they get in school.
Right. Isn't she writing a book or a tutorial on it
Yeah, I think she did put out like a little textbook. She's building some English teaching communities for Japanese people. She's on various social media apps teaching English. So she's very active. And like I said, she does work with people from China, but partly because of her Japanese experience, she kind of focuses there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Maybe let's talk about coaching a little bit, right? Fast forward, shifting gears a little bit. So both Meg and you are coaches. How did you both decide to become coaches? Is it an independent decision on your part? Did you coordinate it? Yeah, and then talk about how you're getting clients and like what kinds of clients generally do you care for, and any fun stories?
Sure.
With coaching.
So Meg has always been into teaching English, except for like a year after she graduated, she worked in a call center and hated it, and then went back to school for like English teaching. And since then, that's been her thing. She's always had a particular love of Japan since being like a Sailor Moon anime nerd in high school. And then, with her exposure living there much more deeply, all sorts of aspects of Japan. And so she's kind of always been there. Although in recent years, like she has played around with like life coaching and that aspect of, I don't want to just teach people English. I am teaching them English to help them with their goals. And so there's that kind of like goal-driven English teaching is a little bit of overlap where, I might do goal-driven business coaching. So I have always had an aspect of learning and teaching. So I've done a lot of it. I mean, there's teaching as a missionary that I mentioned. I have been it was only for a year, but it was a very transformative experience being a crisis counselor.
Where was this? Crisis counselor?
This is in California.
Wait, crisis counselor for what kinds of crises? Family crises?
Okay. Oh, all right. So just like heads up, like I dark subject matter, right? I don't generally like dive right into the specifics of it, without giving people a little heads up. But in Oakland, they have a organization called Bay Area Women Against Rape. And it's one of the first rape crisis counselor like crisis call centers in the US. It has a long and storied past, but it's a respected institution. They do have a men's line, which is, it's not super busy all the time, but it's always hard to find enough male counselors to cover the men's line. And I just happened to
run into somebody. Male rape victims.
Yes, that is correct. Okay. Yeah, even though it's Bay Area Women Against Rape, they do have programs for men. And so I had just run into somebody. This is like it's like 2009-ish. I had been an English major, and I was still like doing a combination of temping and teaching myself coding to break into coding. And so I was at a point where it's like I didn't have a lot going on right then. I was kind of in between temp and coding jobs, and I ran into somebody who said they were taking a crisis counseling course. And like I immediately thought of like all of the conversations I've had with people who'd had like really intense, heavy stuff happen to them, and how inadequately I handled those. And so it's like I could deal with some I could stand to learn a little bit of crisis counseling. And so I volunteered and did that for a year, and eventually that was ended mostly by the fact that like I moved to a place that had terrible reception, so I couldn't really be a good phone crisis counselor. And but that was kind of a powerful experience in terms of a lot of learning to help people with heavy subjects, learning a lot about communication.
I mean, I don't even know what to say. So then you get these calls, and I assume you've gotten calls, right? It's not just standing by. They call in, and it
wasn't like every night, but yeah, I got calls.
Oh man, I mean, how did these people even know? They go to the cops, and then police give them these numbers?
Yeah, so the numbers on rape are like, I forget whether it's like 1 out of every 4 women get assaulted, and 1 out of every, and that doesn't,
in the Bay Area?
No, like in the US generally, I think. And now that doesn't mean like, they're assaulted. How far that assault gets, I think depends. Like they're not factoring in like, a threshold. They're just someone who is sexually attacked, essentially. but the statistics people often say, and these are rough statistics because again, like the self-reporting and other things don't work, but
Yeah.
as many as like 1 in 6 guys also get assaulted, and so which is a lot more than people think. However,
This is 1 in 6
people,
inferred from the amount of reports we're getting, or 1 in 6 that actually report?
I don't know how they calculate it, and again,
Yeah.
like I think to most people it seems high, but I
Yeah.
think the bottom line is like it happens to guys a lot more
Yeah.
than
Well, let's
than
put
I
it
think
this
we've
way.
discussed.
In your year of volunteering for this, how
Well,
many calls have you received?
Well, and so one of the things that I found was that, for example, like I don't think there's a lot of awareness of this as a resource. A lot of men aren't comfortable talking about this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the people that we had for the most part were people who were repeat callers who had like severely traumatic things happen to them for years of their lives. And so
Chronic
normally
victims.
Yep. So what we would, or survivors, is
Yeah.
not everyone likes that terminology, but it's the most widely accepted. And so, yeah, they would be people who had lots of trauma in their lives and would just periodically need someone, like something would bring up that trauma in their life, and they just need someone to talk to. Often didn't get super specific,
Okay.
but someone to help them work through the emotional aspect, help them get grounded, help them, calm down, or, occasionally share some of their fears or worries, get it off their chest a little bit.
Yeah.
And, get to a normal place where they can kind of live their normal life until something else comes up.
You know, this happened to Tim Ferriss. I don't know if you're
I didn't.
aware. Yeah. Well, the podcaster, he apparently, when he was very young, I think maybe 3 or 4 years old, apparently was bullied in a sexual way by like a nanny's son, someone like that. Yeah, chronically. And he didn't remember any of it, apparently.
Yeah.
But I think through, I believe, microdosing, right, which theoretically I've never done it, but could bring experiences from the past into the vision of the mind. And then he saw it, and he was also chronically, I think, depressed for a while. He didn't really know the reason. I think he tried to actually kill himself when he was in college. Yeah, that was the beginning of one of his books. But anyway, I think he was able to connect the dots. A lot of these bad feelings and self-loathing sorts of mentalities, I think, are connected to these childhood traumas, which he eventually was able to recollect. And then he now has a therapist that he routinely goes to. And he talks about these outbursts of emotional problems he would have when it was not specifically tied to a sexual assault that just happened, right? It's actually related to something that happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
But then he would have these episodic outbursts where he would need to talk to someone to get that issue resolved. And when you were talking to me about the victims you were helping, right, that would have these flashes of problems that they would need someone to get help from, that reminded me of that. Yeah. He's probably the most prominent, media personality that I can recall that has undergone this kind of duress.
Just to underscore, like, it is more common than we think. When it happens, especially when it happens repeatedly, like it just has a profound emotional impact on people, and they can learn to manage it, but often learning to manage it healthily is, it really helps to have somewhere to go, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a particular call center or, call line, helpline, having that really helps to get you, through the times when it flares up again. I think optimistically, any of us, right, who have been through something difficult or had a hard time, we think like, okay, we're done with that. But especially where it's emotional issues, like emotional issues are hard to be done with once and for all. They often crop up again. And so getting support for that is really helpful.
By the way, I just mentioned the microdosing. This is a subject that's been coming up a lot. Is this something you have, well, maybe this is also related to coaching. Is this something that has come up in the people you interact with in Austin, or in the clients that you have helped in coaching, or people that you have interacted with from the crisis counseling days?
I'm curious about, some of, magic mushrooms and some of the research that's been out, in terms of its ability to, help people deal with terminal illness or deaths of loved ones and other things like bereavement. Like, I think that research is fascinating, but I don't do anything with it. And again, like a part of that is, as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
Oh no.
we're pretty, again, like, you're not like kicked out of the church, but there's like a pretty strong,
Unwritten
code
rule
of
substance.
not taking illegal drugs, and even things that are illegal, like, caffeine laden coffee and tea and whatnot, we avoid. So
Oh really? Not even coffee?
yeah, cigarettes, we avoid that too.
What
So
about alcohol?
no alcohol. Yeah,
No
so,
alcohol. Okay.
So yeah, so
Okay.
there is, we generally avoid those things. Like,
Okay, but soda is fine, right? Like Coke, Diet Coke.
I mean, so soda is not expressly forbidden, but again, like some people do actually say like caffeinated sodas,
Oh, that's true. They
personally
have it,
for
yeah.
them are not, are not okay.
Okay.
Again, like that's there isn't that line there.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of people who kind of say, like, well, the principle of this is taking care of yourself. Caffeine is generally, in the long term, is not helpful.
Okay.
So
if you go to Binghamton University and hit up one of the vending machines, what drinks do they serve there? My understanding is Binghamton is heavily Mormon.
Yeah, Brigham Young University.
Brigham Young,
in Utah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is heavily Mormon. So in the vending machines, you will not find like Coke. And I think like even like root beer or whatever, like they have like sometimes special decaf versions or whatnot.
Yeah.
However, I have talked to people who, when there's like a special guest on campus that drinks Coke, are like the people that will go off campus to fetch Coke. Or like sometimes in some offices that like receive guests, they will have like a mini fridge with a secret stash of Coke. It's kind of funny, but it's not expressly forbidden.
I see.
At least by the religion.
Okay. Well, out of curiosity, what is your favorite drink outside of water?
I very rarely drink things that are not water, actually, just like personally.
Okay.
I have stomach issues occasionally, so ginger ale is both yummy and sometimes helpful if I have stomach issues. But I mean, if I'm kind of like go big or go home, so like I mean like milkshakes or smoothies or some of those great tapioca bowl drinks. Boba.
Like
those
boba
are fantastic.
Yeah. Right on. Okay. So anyway, so we were talking about coaching, right? So talk to me about the clients you've helped, interesting stories about interacting with clients. How has coaching, say, enriched your life experience?
All right. There's a lot of ways. So it's coaching is part of my personal journey to flip from a paradigm where I always was pragmatic first, kind of like when I chose coding, I did genuinely enjoy coding, but a lot of my considerations behind that career are probably ones that would be, very familiar to, even Chinese people, right? It's a prestigious, well-paid career. I think in America, it also imparts a certain amount of flexibility. And so it was a very pragmatic concern. First and foremost, one of my goals for a career was providing for a family. Did you care much for prestige? Status? Vanity? I can't say I'm free of it. It's not a controlling thought of mine. But for example, when I started out as a coach, and I see a lot of the coaches I kind of described earlier that I feel like are kind of BS coaches, there's like a part of me that's like, oh my goodness, like when I tell someone I'm a coach, are they going to think I'm one of those coaches? So I think about, things like that sometimes. I'm not.
Where do you think that comes from? That mentality of wanting to be perceived in a certain way?
I mean, so obviously, like, the honest answer that I don't want to give you is insecurity, right? Like I still have insecurities. As a coach, I think there's a role that you should know everything. I most certainly don't know everything, so I feel like a fraud a lot of the time. And I remind myself the reason why I'm a coach. And that's actually true. Like in a lot of places, like there's as a coder, there's a lot of people who feel like frauds because they don't know everything there is about coding, which you can't these days. But like, but there's some of that as a coach as well. And then I remind myself, like, I'm not really there to know everything. I'm not a consultant, which is a difference, right? If you want to, if you want someone to tell you the legal structure, the ideal legal structure for your new business, that's a consultant. It's, very specific knowledge base. If you want someone to help you set up your YouTube channel and start a YouTube business, you might get someone who specializes in specifically that. I'm not that. I am an evangelist of what I feel are transformative principles, like the importance of habits. There's a lot of data behind that. I have, a background in instructional education and design. And so, there's research on habits, and I feel a lot of people overlook that. I evangelize that. And it's kind of that process of, some of the basic goal setting and turning, your goals into habits that I evangelize. And so I have to kind of remind myself of that. But yeah, there's parts where I feel insecure, or I pridefully think like, oh, I don't want to be grouped or lumped with that other group of people that I disagree with. So that stuff is going on in my head. But I never felt, for example, like my dad's a lawyer and always said, a Juris Doctorate is a very economical degree, law degree. I'm really glad I'm not a lawyer, but like I didn't look at those positions and say like, oh, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer because they're, important people in society.
I thought your dad was an accountant. Did he also?
My mom is an accountant.
Oh,
so,
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So I guess you didn't want to be an accountant either.
Oh no! I actually helped my mom with some of her accountant work in high school. I did bank reconciliations. So I learned to do it. It's a doable job. I don't dislike numbers, but I like making stuff. And accountants just tally up stuff that other people make. Okay. For the most part.
Yeah. Well, lawyers make up stuff all the time too.
We have plenty of lawyers. I'm happy I'm not there, and I don't think I'm cut out to be a doctor either.
Right. Okay, so I understand the impact that coaching has had on you, right? You talked about how you just touched upon that, right? But then how to talk about maybe some of the clients you've had, what kinds of clients you've had, what kind of help you've given them, what kind of transformation have you seen with them?
Yeah. So one common thread of people that I often work with is they're people who don't have business partners who are regularly in contact talking through business strategy, right?
Yeah.
And so, some of those are people with dysfunctional partners, or some of the people don't have any partners, or some of them, are partnered with people who are really in the technicality of the business, but not like the strategic aspect. Yeah. So that's like a commonality, but within that, there's a variety of people who own their own company, people who are high level in other companies, or even people who are just like wanting to start from scratch a new company. And it's been in different industries. It's like internet marketing, cryptocurrency. There's been, it was fun to work with someone who wanted to start like a immersive media company. So like not necessarily just virtual reality, but like complex technical environmental software of different types. So it was kind of broad. I was helping them specialize it into like what types of initial services do you want to offer, right? Because it was a very broad area, but it was interesting to like see that aspect of like, all right, this is how someone might, for instance, at a convention or another place where they're trying to get buzz, they might set up kind of a cool high-tech kiosk that has some kind of fun interaction, like, translating someone's movement to music or who knows what, right? And kind of see some of what goes beyond that. So, kind of going back to the impact, one of the impacts of being a coach on me is I get to see a lot of cool things. I learn a lot more about cryptocurrency than I would know otherwise, or these other industries. So like, while I would not be able to start companies in all of these industries at once, I get to be a little piece of the action, and I love learning more about them. So that's exciting. Results is very important to me. I find, there are roughly like 5 things that really block people. So one is overwhelm, meaning they don't know where to start. So they've been putting something off for months or years. And one of the results I'm looking for is very quickly to get people figuring out what exactly that is. Because a lot of times people have like a very vague idea in their head. I help them clarify what that is, and figure out what is a small first step they could start taking now and take action. So, that's one thing I focus on. Energy, we kind of talked about a little bit. You need physical energy. And often if that's missing for somebody, talking with them about their diet or exercise is something that I will do. And one of the things that I think a lot of people miss is they'll try a diet program, like some form of healthy eating. They'll have tried some form of dieting or changed their diet or exercise. They'll find it hard. They'll quit doing it and they'll say, I'm not disciplined enough. And in my experience, that's crap. You quit that habit because it wasn't working for you and you weren't seeing the results. And what you need to do, and what I work with people doing, is like experiment with several different forms of exercise or several different, forms of diet or sleep. Sleep is another thing, a big thing that people often don't do well. Try out different sleep routines or hacks or whatever it is until they get to a place where they feel like they have regular energy. Time is another one. So like focus and productivity, work with people there. And then discouragement is another big blocker, right? Whatever you do, like if you're starting to learn the 100 lessons you need to start a new business, you're going to fail at several of those. That's going to be discouraging. Yeah. So I work with people just on kind of mindset and some of the how to handle stress, how to handle those things that come out of the blue and just like sideswipe you. And so that what I find with a lot of people is that a common comment I get is that they're not as knocked off course. Their lows are not as low when something happens. So they're kind of able to like keep working through that. So I think that's about 4 of the major factors. And the other one is just like technical knowledge. I'm not a consultant. And while I focus on product development in terms of, and software is like where I am most comfortable with, occasionally I will bring that in, and actually do something a little bit more consulting. So I've talked with people who agile is something that comes up in development processes, is an area where like I kind of move occasionally from like just coaching in terms of like asking someone to, set their priorities, clarify, break it down, and kind of work in a very client-centered way. That's one of the few areas where like, well, if you need this, I can give you like a short presentation or explanation of how software development works. But for the most part, I'm not really a consultant. But what I do in that case is help them identify where those technical gaps are for them so that they can then find the right resources and, keep going rather than just feeling stuck.
Okay. Wow. Man. So maybe let's talk a little bit about Austin, your decision of moving from California to Austin. Yeah. You became a coach after you moved to Austin. Is that right?
So I was doing some communications training, for example, at a company before I even left. Before I left the company, and actually I'm going to do a video about this. You inspired me to reinvigorate my YouTube channel. So,
right on.
But I'm doing one video about why I left engineering, where I go more in depth into that. And I'm doing another one a little bit that will go into some of the stuff that you're kind of asking about, which is like technically, how did I do it? What are the things I did to like de-risk starting my own company. And one of those things is well before I quit my job, I was researching about coaching. I was blogging to try and like formulate what are my theories, like what ideas am I drawing on, what research am I drawing on to help people and kind of come up with my personal theory of coaching. And then I was volunteering to help people. Like I'd put it on Facebook being like, hey, anyone have goals they want to help coach with? Because I really didn't know at that point what my niche would be. So I started that process. When I quit my job, I quit on really good terms with my job and negotiated like a fantastic arrangement where I was making more than a year's salary, full-time in Austin, but I was only working part-time for my company. And then, use some of that other time to like continue other coaching trials. I went through a period where I was really focused on work from home, like parents who have to work from home. And I just didn't like find my stride with that niche. For a while, Meg and I both did a few pilot seminars for like couples communication, which was like fun, but again, like it wasn't really the route I wanted to take, and then kind of landed more on people either transitioning to entrepreneurship or starting a new product within their current business. Kind of that initial ideation and an execution of a new product or service.
Got it. Well, so I wanted to ask you about your move to Austin. I'm glad you were going to come out with those videos. I think it would be really helpful. But I think before we get into that, I realize I haven't asked you about the prospect of the career of coaching, right?
Mhm.
So is this a growing area? How do you acquire customers? And are people,
Yeah.
in different positions realizing the need for this type of service?
Yeah. So I think it is growing, but I also feel like from what I read online that there are more people like the people who want to be coaches is growing faster than the people seeking coaching. And so it is a crowded space, I would say. One of the things I have looked at repeatedly are there absolutely ways to market and acquire customers. And I have a big old spiel about like the 3 different ways to acquire customers. But one of the things that is most effective for general coaching is really the personal networking. And that works for a couple of reasons, because coaching is a basically high-end personalized service.
Yeah.
And the power of networking is you can talk to someone and really give them essentially a custom proposal based on your conversation when you're networking. You can ask them what their specific problems are and say, well, if I were if I were coaching you, these are the things that I would talk about. Like, this is kind of our plan. This is what we might, the questions that we would answer first. And these are the types of like activities that we might start doing, the kinds of habits or routines to work on. So you can give them like a highly customized schedule. And that only works, again, in more expensive or higher end services, because that's not a very scalable model, right? You're investing a lot of time if you're talking to people one-on-one. In my experience, for a lot of people, like the coaching does come from, like, people get interested in coaching based on a recommendation from someone that they know.
Yeah.
And so the networking aspect is one of the ways people feel safest hiring a coach. But that said, there are other ways to build trust. And essentially, if you're a coach and you want to build trust using one of the other channels, essentially ad marketing and general like content branding, content production, you basically can create some other form or service, like an initial service that people might buy into. And then you can market that, like that very niche specific service. And then people who have a positive experience with that, service or product, if you're doing like an online course or something, or a series of YouTube tutorials or whatever it is, people who have a successful experience with that, then you can kind of build up that relationship. So, that's a second way. That's a way that takes a little bit longer. And I've got some experiments running along those lines, mostly around helping people with guided market research is one of my latest experiments that I am running a pilot for next week, and I'm really excited about. And so the idea would be, I'll offer a service where I combination of like free seminars about how to do it, a specific service where eventually I would, I have a step-by-step guide that breaks down a basic market research. This is not everything you're going to want for a big company, but this is everything you need as an individual with an idea to get started on finding some direction for your business. Who do I need to talk to? What problems do they have? What are the products and influencers that I need to compete with or work with to get my voice out there? Like some of those basic questions, it would answer those for you. So that would be an example where I could either, and I'm experimenting with the best format and running pilots, I could do this as a taught seminar, I could release YouTube videos, and then I could offer like a discrete service. And so that's kind of an example of, in a relationship where you really, really need to build trust with someone, like coaching, where you kind of have to think about how you're doing that. And networking is one of the easiest ways, again, like in person, that's where a lot of people build trust.
So when you do your pilot, how do you get customers for that pilot? How do you advertise about it?
So, I mean, I've already done some market research. I've done this market research process myself. And so I find groups. One of the things that is interesting is that I'm interested specifically for this pilot in engineers who are not yet entrepreneurs, but who want to be. That is a more difficult niche to reach, because there aren't really groups of like engineers who became entrepreneurs. And although I can find, for instance, on Quora or Reddit or something, you can see questions from engineers asking about how to start their company. So there's a need there, right? So I am a huge fan of just blasting your personal networks, like always just ask your personal networks.
Okay.
And I know lots of engineers from my time, so I'll just
Right.
send out a broad thing. But in other entrepreneur groups that I'll go to, I'll just talk to people, startup conversations. I don't want to be spammy.
Is that
so
Facebook
in that
groups?
case, yeah, Facebook groups, for example,
Okay.
or LinkedIn.
Okay.
So I don't want to be spammy. I'm not going to say like, hey, come to my seminar, right? So instead I might say, hey, who's here is an engineer. I'd like to hear about your obstacles. And then, talk to them. If someone says like, figuring out, like something that amounts to like, I need help with basic market research, I can start up an individual conversation and just say like, hey, I've got a pilot. The pilot's free. I have limited seats. Are you interested in, being one of those 10 people in the initial pilot and getting free help with your marketing?
Got it. Okay. I assume you could also go on Twitter. I mean, there are people saying they're in transition, they're figuring stuff out.
Yeah.
And Twitter has become like sort of an internal voice for a lot of people now. They just say whatever's on their mind, right? And I wonder if there's, algorithms that can help you basically parse the social graph for, requests for, you can look for keywords like
hashtags.
In transition, or I'm so lost or something like that. I'm an engineer looking to become an entrepreneur, something like that, right?
Yeah. So like the tools on Twitter, like you can, like they're powerful for looking up hashtags, and they're like great tools for like looking at, what things are trending or what are related hashtags and whatnot to break it down with. But in terms of like searching, I'm not sure if on Twitter you can search for like, I want someone who has engineer in their bio, who tweets something with the hashtag or who follows the subject of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I know that there are paid products in like LinkedIn where you can target that person, and like Facebook ads, you can generally get pretty granular. Twitter, I have less experience with that particular medium, but like that's the kind of thing that you do. You might find, I like Simon Sinek. He does more like leadership than pure entrepreneurship. I'm trying to think of like who would be a great entrepreneur. Someone for small businesses, especially like internet niche businesses that I like, is Pat Flynn. So like what I could do is find someone who has engineer in their bio and who follows Pat Flynn. And then, that would be a good person to like kind of target this market research from. Especially because I stole a bunch of ideas from Pat Flynn for my market research.
Okay. Well, Pat, if you're listening to this, sorry. No, but what we should do is maybe also have a podcast or something. That's what you said about content marketing, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of influencers on Twitter about how to start your own businesses. There's a guy, I think it's called Sweat Equity or something, and he puts out this long list of business, including lawnmower business, some kind of manufacturing business. So these are not your Fortune 500 glamorous like IT startups, right? But they can make a comfortable living. There's virtually no competition, and it's very localized. So you can't, people in China won't take the job away from you. So I mean, I think that could be a fantastic guest for some kind of interaction, or who knows, maybe you can do something and then he can retweet you or something. It just seems to be fitting in that particular demographic.
Yeah. So yeah, that would absolutely be something as I'm content marketing to work with, like, one, go on more podcasts. And I think that's like the initial lighter weight thing. Like if you don't already have a podcast going and running, there are people who do. So like, go ahead and chat with them. And then probably, again, like I have a fascination, particularly with YouTube. I like the video element. It does mean a little bit more editing, like, and a little bit more work. But I think also if I keep my videos, I could eventually, just cut out the audio and turn it into a podcast. So
right. Yeah, there's a lot of good tools now for just indie podcasters all in one. So maybe just lastly, tell us about Austin. How do you like living there? I mean, you moved all the way from the Bay Area, you ditched the good weather, but I suppose you picked up a few other benefits too. So tell us about it.
Well, on the subject of good weather, I feel like we have just as much good weather, but what we get instead of the cold during the winter, like there's like a few weeks that are cold during the winter, but for the most part, it's like 60 or 70. Instead of the cold during the winter, we just have like the super hot summer.
Yes.
And
that lasts 2 or 3 months? 80 degrees, 90 degrees for 2 months?
So that's a little intense, but it's still, usually pretty fine in the morning. There are a lot of mosquitoes in the evening, but if you've got mosquito repellents, it's nice in the evening.
Okay.
So it doesn't cool off a ton, but it cools off enough. So, I mean, the weather isn't too bad. I do miss having shore and mountains and things like that close, where Austin is there are some beautiful hills. There are lots of trees. It's green, a lot greener than either my wife or I were expecting. And so there's beautiful scenery, but not quite the variety you get spoiled with in the Bay Area. I like the fact that it's another tech hub. There's entrepreneurship, and cost was a factor, right? Instead of, I think I was looking at places that were like these tiny rundown dumps, literally on the railroad track in like San Mateo, and they would be like $1.5 million.
Yeah, I know.
In California,
like burned down homes.
Yeah. And that's like not good real estate, or like in a prime real estate area. No. We were somewhat lucky to buy in the Austin market right when COVID hit. We basically had like a 3-year plan that like, hey, if I don't want to become an engineering manager, we're going to strike out, and these are kinds of the projects we're going to work on. So we had that 3-year plan, and COVID hit about 2 years into that, and we're like, all right, we could just do that now. So we kind of we're ready to act. Like, I think we're house hunting in like March, and so we signed our house at like end of June, I think. And so we got it for really cheap, and it has like doubled in price almost. It's great in like the last couple of years. So like the housing market is going up, but even so, like you can get very decent houses for like 500,000 or 600,000, which is still like 3 times less and higher quality than what we were finding in California. So like price was a big factor. And then the other thing that's interesting, so it's generally a liberal area. I run into plenty of people who are, I run into a lot of Californians, and some of my California friends ended up here too. So that was kind of nice. So you do have a lot of people who are very similar in like political belief and culture to what I would have found in the Bay Area and what I grew up with. You do also have some more conservative people. And to me, I really do like the mix. And to give kind of, one example of that actually goes back to church. I was hanging out in church after church, and we talked about the normal spiritual things, but like the vaccination, vaccines came up and masks and vaccines. And the interesting thing that I noticed is like everybody could, and we're talking about like whether we should vaccinate our kids specifically. And, people could talk, we're citing, pros and legitimate criticisms on both sides. It wasn't one person saying, here are all the pros, and one person saying, here are all the criticisms. There were people being like, well, COVID doesn't really hit kids all that hard. And so like, I'm hesitant to, give them a vaccine when chances are they'll be fine if they get COVID. Why medicate them for something they don't need? But then at the same time, also acknowledging, well, but we do vaccinate our kids for all sorts of other stuff, usually stuff that has, more intense consequences for the most part. But like, and that was kind of like the back and forth. They're like, yeah, we do vaccinate our kids for other stuff, but like, a lot of like polio, for example, is much more dangerous to kids than COVID. And so like just being able to see people have intelligent discussions where they weren't married to both sides, to one side of an argument, because they actually had exposure to people with different ideas. Like that was refreshing, a breath of fresh air. And so it was really like, I actually just the other day too, with a couple of fathers from work, one of them, I could tell has all sorts of liberal signals going on in terms of like concern for the environment, being very supportive of their kid that identifies as non-binary, who's a good friend of my kid. And then I have another person, on the flip side of that, at the same table, who's kind of sending me these conservative signals, like talking about their kids being Boy Scouts and other things, right? And like, I'm not sure like that was necessarily a meeting of the minds, but we could find areas of agreements. We could have interesting discussions. And so I really thrive on areas where I get to see both sides or multiple sides of an issue. And I like Austin for that.
Yeah. And you felt that the discussions were a lot more one-sided when you were back in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind, and this is like a flagrant example of that, was being in a company, and there was a director who was now in the engineering area side of the company, but had been like HR person at the company, so like had lots of HR training, and they were talking about sensitivity training, and a Indian woman came up who had been the only female in their technical like doctorate program. And she brought up the point, it's like, yeah, sensitivity is good, but like we could also have like a resiliency program, because there's like the flip side of everybody trying to be as sensitive as possible to people, you know, who are you know, different or a minority. Like a flip side of that is like, if you are a minority, like you will always be a minority, or, you know, at least until demographics change, right? And there's some like resilience you can build that will make you happier where you are with some of like the inevitable things about being a minority. And, you know, that struck a chord with me because I'd been there in Japan. Like I had very much been a minority and realized, you know, sometimes I was where I had legitimate difficulties, but, you know, some of those difficulties, like trying to, you know, find preschool for my kids, sprang from the fact that like, we didn't speak the language. That was an us thing, right? And we had to learn some resilience in terms of like how to adapt and to drive. So that resonated with me. But this director, when he heard that, like he just went silent, and then a moment later changed the subject. And that's kind of one of my few regrets, is I didn't say like, hey, but wait about this issue. I really should have steel manned her, but I was so surprised by that was his reaction, right? You know, people who champion diversity really just shut down at the drop of a hat if you have a different perspective than them. And so, or some of these people, that was a very broad statement. Seeing that happen repeatedly and realizing that there are people who are, you know, very liberal and very broad-minded, but like, you know, there are people of all creeds who do not live up to their creed. And I kind of felt in the Bay Area, there was that culture where like there was an acceptable opinion, right? There's sensitivity training, that's okay. Resilience training is not an okay idea. And kind of feeling that bracketed, versus in an area where you don't assume for the most part that like the vast majority are on your side, where you're in contact with like a critical mass of people who believe something different. Then you actually start entering a different mode where you realize like you have to listen to different opinions. You have to justify your thoughts. And sometimes when you're justifying them, you realize there isn't as much evidence as you thought, etc.
I have to add something to the pro-resiliency program. I think that makes a lot of sense. And so, I mean, there just seems to be a group of people on social media and maybe in mainstream media that have dominated the airwaves with a certain type of idea, and they shout the other side down. And I'll give you another example, right? Let's say abortion, right? So the pro-choice people are very loud. Now, I guess the pro-life now too. I'm just very surprised that there's not much talk about just being responsible. Meaning, I'd love to see data about the percentage of people that have to get an abortion. Like, were they using protection when they were having sexual intercourse? And why is there not as much cultural propaganda around being responsible, right? Like, so, you know, you see Hollywood actors and actresses saying, you know, not your body, no vagina, no voice, or whatever. And I mean, I guess, but like, if a lot of these things are preventative at the beginning, shouldn't that be championed? And shouldn't that be a good thing to advocate? So, you know, so when you talked about this Indian woman advocating for pro-resiliency program, as opposed to, or maybe in conjunction with pro-sensitivity training, I realized there's these other flip sides that need to be explored as well, and they're not being talked about enough. And to me, as, you know, a Chinatown 2.0 person, right? Maybe to wrap this up, I just feel there's some cognitive dissonance happening here. There's just some things that are so obvious to me that are not being talked about.
Yeah, I think a go-to assumption of a lot of people is that anyone who disagrees with me is doing it in bad faith because they were programmed or brainwashed into some terrible way of being. And that's because that's how our media talks about things, right? There's a lot of media that's very distorted one way or another, but very rarely people have all sorts of biases, right? And they're not always like logical or whatnot. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, like generally speaking, people hold their beliefs and opinions for a reason. They have some good data or evidence for what they're saying, or a reasonable interpretation of that, even if it's flawed, right? Something worth exploring, something worth, even if you have counter data, right, worth debunking. But I had that actually experience online where I was chatting with people about like politics in Ukraine, for example,
Yes.
and citing a different citing a particular view, and someone, instead of like engaging with any of my points, just said, well, you must not be doing research because you don't believe, because you don't believe what I believe. And I'm like, well, I gave you my research, but like, it was just, going immediately to that bad faith argument that like, you're not open to new ideas because you don't agree with me.
Well, I mean, based on what you're saying, I can guess the kind of ideas you were putting out, but I'm very curious, and maybe this is the last question because we're way over. What is the one argument for, let's say, the legitimacy of the invasion?
The legitimacy of Russia's invasion.
Aggression, yeah. I assume that's what.
Okay.
I assume that's what take the other person off, right? Like, because it seems like you're not.
Actually, it was a different one.
Okay.
I was actually somewhat. So this is on Glenn Greenwald's page, and I often do, like, that is a sneaky thing about me. I often do steel man whatever opinion I don't think is being shared. But this is on Glenn Greenwald's page, one of his like YouTube videos, and so he makes the strong case actually that basically, even if it's not the only concern, which we can't know until Putin starts invading other countries, it's clear that Putin for a long time has signaled that Ukraine being part of a NATO is the line in the sand for him. And until he actually invaded, many senior officers of US security and foreign policy would point that out as a legitimate worry of Russia. And there are certain things that Glenn Greenwald will go into specifics where, it does sound like not only was the US considering inviting or leaving open the door for Ukraine to join NATO, but under the hood, he will cite several examples of ways we were messing with their government and basically, trying to set up, in kind of typical US fashion, like a puppet pro-US government. In ways that would be very threatening to Russia. And like that stuff we don't even talk about. So that's that side of the argument if you feel it's not being heard. I think there's a flip side to taking the invasion of Ukraine as a threat per se.
Yeah, but I'm just surprised invasion is the answer though. I mean, if you don't like what the US is doing, deal with the US directly, right? Like, why inflict all this atrocity? And
I mean, if you control Ukraine, the US can't put military bases and missiles there, right?
I guess, yeah. But like, I mean, I just feel that in terms of pros and cons, it just seems that there's a lot more harm in going down this rabbit hole, doing it this way.
I mean, sure. I think there's other considerations, right? Like there's saving face politically, and big important people who rule countries, our own included, have big egos, and if they say I don't want to let you do this and you start doing it, then there's like that personal pride example. There's a lot of nationalistic sentiment in Russia, and this is kind of what people cite in terms of like Putin's reason. He's just crazy and nationalistic. I think he is nationalistic. Like I think there's an aspect to it. I think there's multiple factors. And there was an interesting, and I haven't had time to dive into it, there was an interesting perspective someone gave as like of Russia as kind of a mafia run country. And like, basically, yes, if that's true, like if it's run kind of by the old organized crime of the Soviet Union, or like the Soviet Union intelligence,
oligarchy.
Intelligence apparatus that went half black market or half underground, and then is half oligarchy or whatever. You have that kind of system going on. Aggressive action is one of the things that they do well and reach early for. So it's multifaceted, and I like I said, if I'm on Glenn Greenwald's page, I might steel man the argument for like taking the threat of Russia invading Ukraine as a serious issue. If I am, on a different page, I might actually be, citing the exact things that Glenn Greenwald says, to try and get that side of the argument heard.
Got it. Cool. Well, Alec, it's been great. So we covered a lot of ground. We talked about your experience growing up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We talked about your experience moving to Japan, career coaching, Austin. So it's been great having you on. Any last words?
Last words, I will shamelessly, plug my social media presence. So, you can find me at Easier Habits pretty much anywhere, at Easier Habits on Twitter, Easier Habits on YouTube, where I will start posting videos again. And of course, easierhabits.com is my website. And then, the thing I sign off on, my YouTube videos is always make big changes, one small habit at a time, right? Great. And so, yeah, if you're looking to make a big change, chances are you're not going to do it all at once. Find the thing that you can do this week and do that thing. Keep doing it and it'll become a habit.
Perfect. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks a lot, Alec. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on Chinatown 2.0. See you next time.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.